Hi, I'm Paul, the Happy Gilder. Welcome to my channel, and welcome back to the second video of the 2-hour Etsy projects. So in this series, what I do is I create a project from start to finish in less than 2 hours and using materials that come to less than £10 in cost. But before we crack on with that, if you're a fan of Victorian techniques, glass art, gold leaf, sign painting, and much more, you're in the right place because that's all this channel's about, and I try to release a video every week. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description, and I reward my patrons with a different vector design every month. There's also a link to my Instagram, my Etsy shop, and the Happy Gilder Facebook group, where everyone's kind of sharing ideas and helping each other out. So anyway, that out of the way, let's crack on with the vid. Right, so I'm going to start here in Photoshop, and the image I'm using is just one of my wedding photos, but this is a good idea for a wedding project, but also, it'll work with any sort of photo depending on the theme. So the first thing I'm going to do is get my rulers up, which is Control and R, and then I'm going to just drag in from the left hand side until it snaps to the center. I'm going to open the palettes I need, which are going to be my layers and my character, which is basically all of your type tool settings. Just close this. Right, so what I'm going to do is add some text to this, which is going to be a kind of mirrored element to the glass that's going to be framing the picture. So what I need to do first is decide whereabouts on this image I want my text to be. So I'm not going to want it over any sort of features or anything important. So I'm going to just drag a guide down to here. And I think anything below this point is fair game, really. Also want to take into account that the picture frame is going to overlap a little bit onto this image, so I don't want this to be going right to the edges or right down to the bottom. Another thing I'm going to do, just to make it a lot easier to work, is I'm just going to add a layer by clicking here to add layer, and I'm going to fill that layer with black. So what you can do is, if you hold down here, this is already selected on the paint bucket tool, but by default you'll be set on the gradient. Go to paint bucket. If your colours aren't set to black and white, you press D to reset them, and then X to skip between the two colours. So I'm just going to fill this black. Then I'm going to change the opacity to, I don't know, somewhere around about 75%. Now I can still see the image, but where I put my text on is going to make it a lot easier to kind of see how that's going to look. So the first thing I'm going to do is press T to go to the type tool. Then I'm just going to click anywhere here. Now this just types this random Latin phrase before you type anything in. So I'm going to go for, in this font, is I'm going to go all capitals. Change the colour to white, which is up here while you've got your type tool selected. And that'll do for now. This is automatically snapping into that centre guideline. If I now press Control and T, it brings up my transform tools, and then just holding the Alt key, that transforms in from the middle. So let's go with that for starters. Now I'm going to go back to my type tool. Just click anywhere. When you click outside of the text, you can move that around. If you were to click inside, it will switch to the kind of type selection tool. Now for this, I want all of my text selected, and I'm going to choose a font, which is this one. Now this font is all capitals. It's just that if you hold Shift or press Caps Lock, it gives you a kind of a larger capital, a more elaborate one. So I'm going to go with the lowercase capitals, if that makes sense. So, that's the uppercase. And when you've got text selected like this, you can scale it up and down by holding down Control and Shift, and then pressing the comma to scale it down, and the full stop to scale it up. So just come off the type tool by pressing the arrow key, and then I'm just going to drag this down to the center as well. Now this isn't looking great at the moment, but I just want to get all of the elements that I want in place. What I like to do with fonts is make sure that you're not using the same one for every bit of text on the page. Depending on how many lines of text and how busy your design is, I'll swap between 2 or 3 fonts normally. So in this case, I'm only going to have 3 lines. I've got my agenda font at the top, the brilliant font for the name, then I'm going to go back to the agenda font for the last line of text. If this had quite a few more lines, I'd probably go with 3 different fonts, and it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter about mixing serif fonts with sans serif fonts and stuff like that. There's no real hard and fast rules as long as they complement each other. So, go back to my type tool, and the agenda font is selected, and I'm going to go, and make sure I'm all capitals.
Oh.
Just going to scale that back down. Okay, let's drag this into place in the centre, and then we can start working on some layout to see what's going to look nice. Now, it's not looking terrible, but I still think we can do some more. I mean, this is going to be 10 by 8, and on my screen this is pretty small. I'm just going to press Control and plus just to zoom in. And depending on your vinyl cutter and how intricate it can go, will depend on how small you want to go with any of these fonts. So if I double click on this, I'm looking at that's 30, and that's pretty big. You know, I've gone down to like 12, 13 before. That does get a bit fiddly, but it's workable. So firstly, I'm going to scale this down. Let's go with 22 for now and see how we get on. Right. So now what I'm going to do, just to make this look a little bit different so it's separated from the top text, is I'm going to double space this. So I'm just going to press space, arrow, and so on and so forth. There, and I think that looks a little bit nicer. So again, just to check it's centered, I press Control and T, and then I can sort of drag that onto that center line. I think potentially you could go with a bit more separation, maybe just a key line in here that sort of separates it, a nice fine line. So depending on what layer you have selected, your guides will snap to the edges of that layer. So if I just drag this in here, you can see that just snaps to the edge of that C, and that'll do the same on the other end. And that just makes it a bit nicer for me to draw the line so I don't have to worry about where the edges are. So I've got this selected already, but by default you're likely to be on the rectangle tool. So you can press U to select the tool and then Shift and U to skip between them, or you can click and hold it and go down to that tool. So I'm going to go to my line. So I'm just going to click somewhere near here. It doesn't matter if you're right on it because it will snap to the guide anyway, and then just drag. And you can see that's not going straight, but if I just press Shift, that'll automatically snap to perfectly horizontal. Then when I let go, that's bringing up the properties of this shape. And at the moment we've got 1 pixel, which is not what we want. So that's certainly not what we want. So let's go back down and try something like 3 to start with. No, that's still pretty small, so let's go 10. I'm also going to change the colour of that so it matches what we've got. I think that looks pretty good. So if I press Control and then colon, that'll hide my guides. And what I've got there is looking alright. I think I might just make the a little bit smaller. So let's just click on Control and T to transform, and then holding the Alt key, just drag that in from the middle. And then using my arrow keys, I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. So let's have a look at that. I think that looks pretty good, and I also think that I can bring that up a little bit so that's not going to be too tight along the bottom there when it's framed. So I'm just going to shift select all of these layers, and then using my arrows I'm just going to go up to just below the hand in this case. I think that looks alright, and actually just tiny little nudge on this bit. I think, yeah, I think that looks alright. I'm happy with that. So all I need to do now is get this into a format so I can cut the vinyl for the stencil. So if I just change the black layer back to 100%, then I'm just going to flatten this image and save it as a JPEG to import into Vinylmaster. Now I completely accept that the way I do things in this respect is a bit long-winded. I know it makes more sense to do this in Illustrator and then just import the vector directly in there, but I'm just not very good on Illustrator. I've been a photographer for my whole adult life and I know Photoshop very well. So although I use this, it's certainly not made for that. So if you can use Illustrator, certainly recommend that you do it that way. Anyway, I'll hop over into Vinylmaster now. Right, so got Vinylmaster open, and I've set my canvas to the same size as the photo, which is 8 by 10 inches. All I need to do now is to import the file that we just made in Photoshop. So go to File, Import and File, and I'm going to select it, click Open, and then that will give me an option to drag this and snap to the corners. So I'm just going to drag that in here, wait till that lines up, and then just click Vectorize, and it's as simple as that. So what I've got on the left is my original image, and what I've got on the right is what it's selected, and that's not what I want. I want the black to be showing and the white not to be showing. So I right click on the black to show that, and I right click on the white to turn that off. It's important that you turn this off, because if you leave it on, it will cut the path twice. So that's it. Just going to click Trace, then Accept, File, Cut Plot, Send to Cutter. And I've got this set up properly. The only things you'll really need to do here is dependent on the size. At the moment, this is right, and it's rotated so that I use as little vinyl as possible. If you've got a file that is larger than the width of your vinyl cutter, then rotating it, can help to put it in the right orientation. And certainly make sure mirror is checked, because this is going to go on the back of a mirror. Then just going to go to Cut Now and let that cut. Right, so onto the manual stuff now. What I've got here is 8 by 10 4mm thick mirror. I buy these from a local glass company, and they're about £5.50 each. I do recommend, if you've got a glass company near you, getting them cut to size. 4mm is a really nice kind of thickness of mirror. You're not going to get any kind of bowing or anything like that, so they're just sort of extra bit of quality, I suppose. So £5.50 there, and I got this picture frame from The Range, which is a UK sort of department store, and this is £3.50. So it's going to come to £9 in materials. I'm not going to include things like the application tape I use or things like that, just because this is £35 or something for 100 metres. I've had this for over a year, so I'm certainly not going to price up a tiny little square of it. The vinyl I'm going to use I get for about £6 for 6 metres. So anyway, let's get started. I've got the bit of vinyl, I've trimmed across the edges so that it's cut to size, and then all I'm going to do is apply the backing tape and then apply it to the mirror. So firstly I'm just going to tape the vinyl down, and that's because application tape isn't very sticky, and if you're relying on that to sort of hold it onto the surface you're working on, it could be that it doesn't stick and doesn't hold it, and then you can sort of mess things up doing that. So I'm just going to tape the very edge of this down. And I'll always tape it down as well, going in the way that it's been wrapped around the kind of vinyl roll. If you do it sort of taping it that way, you can end up with air bubbles and it sort of messes it up. So, get the application tape. And I'm just going to smooth this on around about an inch at a time as I sort of gradually going down it. Give it a good rub, make sure that's stuck on there nice and firm. And just peel that away along with the sellotape. Then I'm just going to trim that away now. Right, now time to apply it to the back of the mirror. And the easiest way to do this is, again, going with the kind of way that it's sort of folding, is just to peel away around about an inch of the backing paper. And then just fold that down without touching the vinyl. And then you can kind of position this in place without having to worry about that vinyl just falling and sticking to the mirror. So just kind of hold it, make sure running your finger around the edges that it's flush to all the edges, and then you can just smooth that down. And then using the exact same action as it was to apply the application tape, I'm just going to rub this sort of gradually in about 1 inch increments and add it to the mirror. So make sure that's on nice and firm. And then dragging this across the mirror and not upwards, just slowly pull that, making sure that nothing gets plucked with it. And that's it, nice and smooth on there. So now all I need to do is remove the areas that I want to blast away, and yeah, then take it out to the shed and get blasting. So I'm just going to do the next bit in a time lapse and then jump over into the shed. Right, so that's all the vinyl picked. I've now got it in the sandblaster, ready to blast that back coating off. So my pressure settings for the sandblaster are between 30 and 40 psi, and I use 120 grit aluminium oxide as my abrasive. So I'll just show you inside here. There it is. I'm using a number 6 nozzle, and just going to blast all of the back coating off that, apart from the bits that are masked off by the vinyl. Okay, so all the blasting's done now, and this is how that's come out. I haven't cleaned the glass, so it might look a bit murky at the moment. So what I need to do now is change this from frosted and non-transparent to transparent. And the way of doing that is using a clear gloss lacquer. I always go with this one, mainly because I'm normally backing up stuff with paint, and acrylic lacquer doesn't sort of react with enamel as bad as, say, I don't know what the non-acrylic version is called, but yeah, it's also very quick drying, which is really important. So I want to make this into sort of a window, and if I had something that took 2 hours to dry, the likelihood is I'm going to get all manner of dust, flies, whatever in it, depending on where I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to do this in a couple of layers, but each layer takes a minute to dry, maybe even less if you're outside. So I'm going to take that outside now and then just do those layers of acrylic lacquer. Right. So I've put this up against a plank of wood, and the reason being, if you just have this resting and there's a gap behind here, if it's windy out here, or even the slightest gust of wind, will mean that some of that spray paint will end up on the front of the glass, and don't want that at all, because you just have to clean it off, and it's better if you don't have to do that. Also, you want to do this in an area where there's not a lot of dust about. Obviously this is kicking out lacquer, but it's also kicking out air, so if you're in an area where there's lots of sawdust, that's just going to disturb that, and you're likely going to end up with that all over the sort of tacky side. Or I've chosen an area that's okay, I mean, not the greatest, but it will do. So here we go. Well, there's 2 lessons to be learned here. The first is how to make this product in a couple of hours for less than £10. And the second is always check your spelling. Unbelievable. But it doesn't matter. Like I said last week, after I messed up that one, I only make these to kind of do YouTube demonstrations, but would have been nice to have in the house, but I can always make it again. It takes less than 2 hours. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel and click the little thumbs up icon, and please share it with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So till next time, cheers.